The air in my grandmother's house always carried a faint scent of lavender and old books. A comforting aroma that usually lulled me into a sense of peaceful nostalgia. But that night, as I lay in the twin bed by the window, every creak of the floorboards felt like a violation. The woman's voice had stopped. But the silence that followed was worse. It was a thick, expectant silence. As if the house itself was holding its breath. After my scream and the slamming down of the blind, I had fled upstairs. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. The upstairs guest bedroom was smaller. Stuffer. It felt less secure than the one below. The bed frame was iron, cold to the touch. The floral quilt smelled of mothballs. I burrowed underneath. Phone gripped in my white-knuckled hand. Its glow was the only light in the impenetrable dark. I listened so intently that the blood rushing in my own ears sounded like distant traffic. The rational part of my brain tried to assemble explanations. A confused neighbor. A lost, lonely person with poor social skills. But the primal, fearful core of me replayed her face. That smile wasn't friendly. It was a mask of pleasantry stretched over something hollow. Predatory. It didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were dark pits. Reflecting the dim porch light. Fixed unerringly on the gap in the blinds. As if she could see me perfectly in the dark. 2 hours ticked by. No more banging. No more hellos. The tension began to leach away. Replaced by a heavy exhaustion. Finally, courage bolstered by sheer fatigue, I crept back downstairs. Each step was a deliberate, silent motion. I conducted a slow patrol of the first floor. Peering out from the edges of every window. The porch was empty. The street was still. A mist had rolled in. Swallowing the ends of the street lights in hazy halos. She was gone. The next morning, in the clear light of day, the event felt surreal. I made coffee in my grandma's percolator. The normalcy of the ritual was soothing. When I called her, I expected gentle concern. Maybe even a chuckle at my jumpiness. I did not expect the raw, undiluted panic in her voice. A woman at the Piggly Wiggly, she'd cried. Her voice was thin and reedy with fear. In the canned vegetable aisle. Just standing there. Holding a can of peas. Staring at me with this grin. I asked if she needed help. She just shook her head. And kept smiling. I moved to the soups. When I looked up, she was at the end of the aisle. Still watching. I left my card right there, Nicholas. I walked out. Her story dismantled my fragile rationalizations. A coincidence was possible. But the specific detail of the unsettling smile tied the two events together. With a chilling nod. My grandma was not given to hysterics. The terror in her voice was a contagion. I felt it seep into me anew. I spent the rest of the weekend in a state of heightened alert. I bought heavier duty locks. I drew every curtain shut before sunset. I stopped texting friends. I started researching local news. I found nothing. On my last night, a new fear emerged. What if this wasn't about me at all? What if it was about her? What if this woman had fixated on my grandmother? The thought of that smiling face appearing at her window after I was gone was worse. Before leaving, I called the local police. The officer was polite. Promised extra patrols. It felt futile. I drove back to my apartment. The familiar skyline was a welcome sight. But the comfort was incomplete. For weeks, I called my grandmother every night. Not just to chat. to perform a verbal wellness check. She never mentioned the woman again. After a month, I allowed myself to believe it was over. A bizarre, isolated event. Then, 3 months later, my mother called. Her tone was off. Too bright. Too careful. You remember that weird thing you told Grandma about? The lady on the porch. My stomach dropped. Well, Mom continued. Mrs. Henderson down the street mentioned something last week. A similar thing. A woman just standing on her lawn at night. Smiling toward her house. Didn't come to the door. Didn't say anything. Just stood there. Until Mrs. Henderson turned on the floodlight. Then she just walked away. Into the shadows. The chill returned. Deeper. More permanent. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't over. Somewhere out there, a woman with a freakish smile was still making her rounds. Her purpose unknown. Her hello a silent promise. My grandmother's house was just one stop. And I knew, with a certainty that haunts me to this day, that she would find another. The sprint back to my dorm at Syracuse was a blur. I didn't just run. I ricocheted off sidewalks. Cut through a reeking alley. Vaulted a fence. When I slammed the dorm room door, the sound echoed. My roommate was gone. The silence was absolute. Broken only by my ragged, sobbing breaths. I collapsed against the door. Slid down to the floor. The threat in that final text burned in my mind. You're a little piece of shit. I would have strangled your ugly ass. The vulgarity was a shockwave. This wasn't a scam. It was a glimpse into a violent psyche. I fumbled with my phone. Hands shaking. I took screenshots. Saved them in 3 different places. Evidence. But what was it evidence of? A near miss. A terrifying conversation. Without a license plate. Without a photo. Without a real name. Stephanie's profile was already deleted. A ghost in the machine. For days, I was a ghost on campus. I jumped at every slowing car. Men in their 50s or 60s triggered a cold sweat. I scrutinized every face. I stopped using dating apps. The trust was obliterated. Replaced by a deep-seated fear. The fear that behind every smiling profile picture was a predator. Or a collaborative nightmare. The incident festered. It evolved from a scary story into a psychological trap. I became obsessed with the logistics. How had they done it? Was Stephanie even real? Or was it the man all along? The request to share my location was the masterstroke. It meant running was almost futile. They could track me. The father picking me up was social engineering. A figure of presumed authority. Meant to bypass suspicion. Who argues with a protective dad? A week later, I went to campus security. I sat in a sterile office. Showed the screenshots. The officer listened. Took notes. Asked questions. His final sigh told me everything. We'll increase patrols, he said. But without a plate or a name, there's not much we can do. These sophisticated catfishing setups are hard to trace. His use of the word sophisticated was chilling. This was a planned hunt. I left feeling hollow. The official path was a dead end. The paranoia began to mutate. Were they still out there? Was Stephanie reskinned? A new name. New photos. Trolling for the next victim. I scrolled through local news. My heart in my throat at every missing person headline. Was it my fault if someone else wasn't as lucky? One night, a month later, I was in the library. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. A text. We know where you live. The world fell away. The library hum dissolved into a high-pitched ring. They'd found me. They had my number. My name. My school. I shot up. Knocked over my coffee. Fled. Running across the quad. Head on a swivel. Back in my room. Door locked. Chair wedged under the knob. I stared at the message. Slowly, a different thought emerged. This was a different area code. The syntax was off. It felt cheap. I blocked the number. My hands still shook. But my mind cleared. Was it them? Or was it random spam? A horrific coincidence tapping into my trauma? That is the true horror he left me with. I will never know. The tangible thread faded. The man. The car. The text. But he succeeded. He gifted me a permanent state of vigilance. A rewiring of my trust. The world of casual connections is now a minefield. Every stranger's smile could hide a grotesque grin. Every friendly offer could be a trap. He didn't get me into his car that night. But in a way, he still took me. He locked me in a prison of my own suspicion. And the sentence feels like it might be life. Tom's dismissal echoed in my head. Be a man and confront whoever was down there. It was a taunt. Fear had overridden any pride. The school basement was no longer a storage area. It was a lair. And I had been sent down to feed whatever inhabited it. After locking the heavy metal basement door, I leaned against it. My ear pressed to the cold steel. No sounds came from below. No thumps. No footsteps. No rustling. It was the silence of something holding very, very still. My phone vibrated. Tom. Well? What's down there? I didn't text back. I ran. Through the empty, overlit hallways. My keys jangling wildly. The familiar landscape was now alien. Threatening. Every shadowed doorway was a hiding place. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was concealing. I didn't follow procedure. I didn't check the bathrooms. I didn't turn off the gym lights. I went straight to the main entrance. Fumbled with the keys. Shoved the master key into the deadbolt. Threw the door open. I burst out into the cool summer night. I didn't lock it behind me. I ran to my car. Threw myself inside. Locked the doors. I stared back at the dark shape of the school. A few windows glowed. Including the one that overlooked the gym. And the access point to the vents above it. The drive home was a blur. My mind replayed the sequence. The covered mannequin. The exposed one. The cloth in the corner, moving. And finally, the slow, deliberate thump, thump. Thump from the vent directly overhead. The final bang wasn't an attempt to break through. I realized this later. It was a punctuation mark. A final, mocking statement. I am here. I am above you. And you are nothing. The next day was my last shift. I thought about not going. But I needed the paycheck. A stubborn part of me refused to let the fear win. I arrived in the afternoon sun. Tom was in the janitorial closet. Mixing floor wax. Hey, kid. You never texted me back last night. Everything get locked up? He asked. Yeah, I said. My voice was steady. I saw something in the corner. A shadow or something. But when I went back, it was gone. Must have been my eyes playing tricks in the dark. The partial light tasted bitter. Tom chuckled. Told you. Spooky down there. All those old mannequins look like people. Probably just a rat. Knocked the cloth off. He seemed unconcerned. Already moving on. His rational explanation was a life raft. I clung to it. A rat. A draft. An overactive imagination. I repeated it like a mantra. I performed my mundane duties. I avoided the gym. I avoided the basement door. At the end of my shift, I passed the principal's office. The door was ajar. A small TV played the local news on mute. A graphic on the screen caught my eye. Police seek information on serial trespasser. I stopped. Frozen. I stepped in. Turned up the volume. The news anchor spoke calmly. Incidents at several vacant properties. And 2 schools in the adjacent county. Over the past 6 months. Intruder is described as exceptionally adept at entering and hiding within ventilation systems and drop ceilings. No thefts or assaults reported. But police are concerned due to the escalating nature of the breaches. The video cut to a police sergeant. The individual appears to have an intimate knowledge of building schematics and a preference for confined, elevated spaces. It's a highly unusual and disturbing pattern. The broadcast moved to the weather. I stood there. The blood drained from my face. It wasn't a rat. It wasn't my imagination. The thumps in the vent. The moving cloth. It was a person. A person who crawled through buildings. A person who hid under sheets and watched. Who pressed themselves against the thin metal of air ducts. Listening to the people below. My final act as a janitor was to lock the school. This time, I did it meticulously. Checking every door. Every window. As I turned the key in the front door, I looked up. My eyes traced the lines of the roof. Searching for the vents. I saw them. A row of silent, slat mouths. I got in my car. Drove away. Never looked back. I collected my last paycheck by mail. I never spoke to Tom again. For years afterward, I couldn't enter any building with a drop ceiling without my eyes drifting upward, searching for the subtle sag, the misplaced tile, the telltale fingerprint of dust. The horror of that night wasn't in what I saw. It was in what I understood. There are people in this world who don't want your things. Or even your life. Not in a straightforward way. They want your space. They want your walls. Your ceilings. They want to be the unseen pressure in the dark above you. The source of the unexplained noise. The quiet inhabitant of your blind spots. They don't want to haunt your house. They want to become a part of its structure. And on that last summer night, in the basement of my old high school, I had been inches away. Inches, and a thin sheet of metal. Away from meeting one.